For those of us that were in attendance at the University of Hawai'i football game against Portland State, I'm sure we all had the same thought throughout the night. Dang, I really wonder how that Fiji tribute concert is going. Because this game was not an exciting game. I don't want to call it boring, but it was not exciting. And I think the most exciting plays in this game were taken away from penalties, which for the University of Hawai'i, 13 penalties is unacceptable if you want to be a bowl team. But at the end of the day, they're still 3-1. This is the best start ever in the Timmy Chang era, and they have never been 3-1 since 2019 when that team went 10-5 and won a bowl game. I know a lot of fans were probably disappointed at the offensive output in this game, right? Only 2 touchdowns and then 3 field goals in that second half, right? And this team had 0 points in the first quarter against a FCS team that got blown out in their previous matchups. But I do think it's worth noting that Hawaii was still without Micah Alejado. You're starting a backup quarterback in Luke Weaver. You're also without your leading receiver from last year, Nick Senecal. And you're also without Jackson Harris, who is that true X-receiver that can really open up things for this offense. There was also some shuffling on the offensive line with Kuao Pehopa back at right guard. I believe we saw Judah Kaio take some snaps at center over Ethan Spencer throughout the course of this game. So there's a lot of things from the offense where you can point to as a reason for them not, covering whatever the point spread was. I believe Hawaii is favored by 35 points or more in this game. And just when you put all of the things on the table of what was available, you could kind of see that, hey, Hawaii probably is not going to cover that point spread, and it's probably not going to be a blowout, even though that's what the general public think was going to happen. I know it was homecoming, so maybe fans thought they were going to be a high-scoring game because it was homecoming. But I think the number one thing for this game that is a positive is that we got out of it with a win, and there wasn't really any major injuries. One thing to consider why that is a win, just as a huge thing that there's no major injuries or additional injuries in this game, is that this is still the 4th game in a 6-game stretch that Hawaii football is starting the season off with, right? There is no bye week until after the Air Force game, so there's a lot of toll that these bodies are taking. 6 weeks without a bye week, that's a pretty long time. Now, the highlights for this offense in this game, obviously it goes to the running backs. Cam Barfield scored his first 2 touchdowns as a member of the Rainbow Warriors. Landon Sims is still doing Landon Sims things. He's got 40 yards on the ground, 40 yards receiving, kind of showing that he can be an every down back. So between those 2 players, I believe they got around 146 yards of total offense between the 2 of them, right? They were definitely top 2 in all-purpose yards when you factor in that Cam Barfield's also in the kickoff return. So those 2 players and the running backs in general have kind of been the staple for this offense, right? Coming into this year, you think it's going to be the quarterbacks, the receivers. That was the talk of the national media, that this is probably the most experienced, the most talented receiver group in the Mountain West, right? You had Nick Senecal and Pofele Ashlock being preseason Mountain West selections. But as we all know, those are our projections, right? It's going to come down to what we see on film, what we see on the field. And right now, the running backs have been the MVPs of these offense because we've, kind of only had one true healthy half of Micah Alejado, and the rest has been him been banged up, or we had Luke Weaver as the quarterback. So MVPs of the offense so far goes to the running backs. It was good to see Cam Barfield get into the end zone. I know they wanted to review that first touchdown that he had, but he had a very nice leap over the pylon. So that was good to see. Now, some of the negatives for the offense, I think the offensive line had a really bad day at the office, right? Yes, we ran for over 100 yards, but their pass protection, Luke Weaver was only sacked 2 times, but there was definitely a lot of holding penalties and penalties in general that kind of held back this offense from really putting up more points on the scoreboard, right? We had Brandon White score on a end around that got taken away due to penalty. And then we also had a deep shot to Brandon White in the end zone, where that was probably the first deep shot, deep passing play that Luke Weaver has ever completed for this offense, got wiped away from a holding penalty. So the offensive line, they're going to have to figure some things out, right? Like, this is an offensive line that already had some depth issues with a transfer during training camp to UCLA. And, yes, you have Kuape Hopo back at right guard, but now you have the center, potentially an open competition between Judah Kayu and Ethan Spencer. This offense is only going to go as far as the offensive line can take them. How do the coaches feel about that? You can kind of see it in the play calling, where this team needs to kind of possess the ball and kind of get into some short yardage situations so that it's manageable, where they don't have to get into pass protection a lot. But overall, I think in this game, our offense was kind of vanilla. It almost felt like a NFL preseason game before conference play, right? Before we host Fresno State next weekend. Again, I know this was not the offensive output that fans wanted to see. It definitely wasn't the offensive output that sports books and the betting market wanted to see. But I do think that our coaches did kind of hold back a little bit, kind of made this offense a little vanilla. You don't want to show too much on film before you take on Fresno State in that Mountain West opener. But yeah, this team is 3-1, and they're halfway towards a bowl game, and that should be celebrated, right? Winning isn't always pretty, and the fact that the University of Hawaii was able to get an ugly win against an opponent, I guess that's a positive sign. Yes, Portland State wasn't the strongest opponent. They have barely put up points on the scoreboard, so that's something that might be a little bit disappointing to see. But all good teams can win in multiple ways, and the way that they won tonight was very playing ball control, leaning on your defense, leaning on your special teams, winning the field position battle. And that's something that we're going to probably have to do against some of the more stronger teams in the conference, where there is a talent disparity, right? You don't want to get into a shootout if you don't have the weapons to win a shootout. And sometimes for Hawaii, especially for this offense, sometimes the strength is going to be moving the chains instead of getting touchdowns and winning the long game. Now, defense did their job in this game. They got that first turnover. Elijah Palmer got an interception to set up the first touchdown drive for the University of Hawai'i. And Hawaii is able to take a 14-0 lead in the locker rooms. And that's pretty much all that they needed, right? I think in the second half, there was 4 total field goals combined, which really didn't make a factor at the end result. So this was definitely a better job against the running game. I believe Hawaii held the Vikings to just 1.8 yards per rush attempt. I know the rushing defense has been something that was a weakness for this team in the previous 3 weeks against Stanford, against Arizona, a little bit against Sam Houston State. So to see an improvement in that area, that was good to see. Portland State, offensively, they really relied on their quick passing game. So our pass rush didn't really have much opportunities to get to the quarterback. And I think that also shows a little bit of respect on our defensive ends. In that Stanford game, they had 6 pressures on their quarterback. They've been coming alive recently with some of their sacks. I know last week against Sam Houston State, Lester Langofuana had a big game. So did Jackie Johnson. So that's definitely something on film that teams are seeing. Like, hey, we do not want to get into 3rd and long against the Rainbow Warriors, because if we do, that's a losing battle. So credit to John Kiavis Sangapolotele. He had a pretty decent game. He did throw that 1 interception, but other than that, he did a good job of taking care of the ball. After that, throughout the last 3 quarters, he really didn't have too much bad throws. It was kind of cool to see. At the end of the game, a lot of players went up to John to kind of greet him and show some love. Even Coach Timmy Chang went over to him. The lei that Coach Timmy Chang was wearing, he gave that to John after the game. So it was cool to see, even though players might transfer out of the program, there's still love there, right? I'm pretty sure John transferred out because he wanted to play more. Definitely with Micah Alejado at QB1, there was probably not going to be much opportunities. So, credit to John for finding an opportunity to play and start now for Portland State. You also can't forget the kicker, Kansei Matsuzawa. He set a new career high for longest field goal attempt with 44 yards, and he broke that a few plays later with a 47-yard field goal. So he's kind of getting up there. You know, maybe we might see him hit a 50-yarder or attempt one later this season. And I think that's kind of cool to see, that if we can get to the opposing teams in that territory, that we can go out and bring out a weapon in Kansei, because he also kicked a 35-yarder at the end of the game. So as far as I can tell, he's 11 for 11 now on field goals through the first 4 games of the season. We also got to see him wear his new jersey with kanji on the back of it, on his nameplate. So that was kind of cool to see. And you just kind of love things like that, where Hawaii, again, is a melting pot of all different types of cultures. So that was cool to see, you know, the UH athletic department put that together so that, you know, Kansei's, you know, Japanese heritage was honored. And in the days of NIL, you kind of need that, right? This was a relatively straightforward video this time around, because there really wasn't much to take away from this. Just, hey, they got to win. They're 3-1. They're on track to make a bowl game this year, which would be huge for this coaching staff and Coach Timmy Chang. But there's still work to be done. They way too many penalties, 13 penalties. That's unacceptable. Now, it's all going to come down to what we see against Fresno State in this Mountain West opener. Timmy Chang currently is 0-3 in the Mountain West openers. So if the University of Hawaii can beat Fresno State, I don't care what the spread is, I don't care who's favorite, I don't care what the over-under is. If they can get a win against Fresno State to start Mountain West play and improve to 4-1, whatever happened in this game against Portland State will be forgiven, it will be forgotten, and the vibes will be at all-time high.